I greet you in the name of the true and ever-living God who bless, redeem, and sanctify us. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be so acceptable in thy sight, O God, my rock and my salvation. Let us pray. Merciful Father, thank you for sending us your Son to free us from sin and make us new. Help us to look forward in hope to the life without fear that you have planned for each and every one of us. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning, St. Mark's, my family, and my family on Facebook. How are you?
Great.
It's getting warmer. At least in my heart. There's a famous Jim Reeves song, and I don't know if you're young enough or old enough to remember it. The song says, "Have thine own way, Lord." But there's a verse that says, "Mold me and make me after thy will while I am waiting, yielded and still." In Luke's 15th chapter and the second verse, and it says, "And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" It takes me back to a story about 10, 15 years ago at my Episcopal church in Brooklyn, when one morning a homeless man walked into the church and the church went into a little uproar. The ushers panicked because there was a smell on this homeless man. You could smell it from the time he opened the door. The ushers panicked, and the person he sat next to them almost lost their mind. And the priest went into a sudden pause. But after he said to me, "John, we got a teachable moment this morning. We got a teachable moment this morning because here is someone coming into our church. And rather than we all reached out and welcome him, we found a way how we can distance ourselves from him." Did we all understand that there's a possibility or a true way that we might have just been encountered and experienced with Jesus? Sometimes that's what we have to ask ourselves. And I was reading a sermon from Pope Francis about going to church does not make you a good person. And he states that people are overcome by worldliness and fail to see or witness the suffering of people around them. And then he quotes, "With a worldly heart, you can go to church, you can pray, you can do many things. But if your heart is just worldly, you cannot understand the needs and the hardship of others." This is the case of the scribes and the Pharisees today. They live their lives for their personal achievements and their status. I call it, if you didn't fit into their club, then you must be kept outside. If you didn't fit into the club, you must be kept outside. Today's gospel, Jesus has his famous adversaries that are once again challenging him. The Pharisees, they ridicule him for eating and associating with tax collectors and sinners. And you remember who the tax collectors are? Those that took more than was necessary on their taxes. And then you know what they're considered sinners. Sinners were those who disobeyed the food laws and made a very offensive in the behavior of Israel. The challenge for us, Jesus' message is not just for one group or the other group. Jesus' message is for all. That's why we go to Luke chapter 5 and the 31st verse when he says, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but those who are sick, because I've come to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance." I've come to call not the righteous, but the sinners to repentance. And there's the analogy of this room, where because of the life we live, we sometimes believe that if we fall from grace, forgiveness is not something that should be given to each and every one of us. We have 3 parables in this chapter. The one highlighted here is the prodigal son. But there's a first one that is talking about the lost sheep where the owner had 100 sheep and he lost one. And he went and worked diligently until he found it. And when he found it, he was so happy. He told the entire community, I have found the sheep that I've lost. And then the second parable is the lost coin. The woman who lost the silver coin. And yes, we may say it's just a coin. But in today's world, that silver coin is about $250 to $300. So losing one coin is a big deal. And when she found it, she went and told her friends. She rejoiced. And she was happy. But I like the prodigal son. The son who said to dad, I request my inheritance. And he left and he went off and he squandered it. But I kind of laughed because we just left Christian formation. And I heard Matt said it's like we who have our children and we treat them and take care of them to be such perfect children, and then we send them off to school and they're living in the life that is totally new. Just like this prodigal son, he got all his worth and he went out and he was showing off. I could just see him at the bar in today's world. He'd be saying, buy drinks for the entire bar. Because as far as he's concerned, the party was never going to end. But the party ended, and life changed. But the great thing about this, that he recognized that he had fallen, and he knew the only chance in life was to go back to his father. But he didn't just say, I'm going to go back to my father. He said clearly, I'm going to go back to my father, and when I see him, I will bow on my knees, and I will ask for forgiveness. But when he was while, the chapter 15, the 20th verse says, but while he was far off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion. And he ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. But the 21st verse is the verse that stands out. When the son says, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. The key is the son acknowledging. The key for him to have seen that he had committed sin, that he had done wrong, but there was also forgiveness for him. But sometimes we as parents, our children do fall. And sometimes we do harden our hearts and maybe sometimes not want to find a way for forgiveness. But I want us to just put ourselves in perspective of this father. It said that the father saw him afar off and went to greet him. It is easy to say the father just happened to be looking through the window or looking out that day and saw him. I tend not to believe that. I tend to believe that that father prayed every day hoping that he would see his son alive again. So as he was looking through the window, today just happened to be the day that his prayer was answered. Today was the day his prayer was answered. And what he did was he ran to his son. And he said, my child that was lost has now been found. And that's the greatness of our God. He does not hold yesterday or a week or a month or a year ago against us. He asks us to come as we are, seeking forgiveness, and he will be able to grant us that forgiveness. The prodigal son behavior was one that believed and he knew the best. He came with humble hearts and kneeled before his father. You know, we can easily get to the part where the other son, who was pretty upset because he was looking at it in the moment. He was looking at it that the son was being shown favoritism. And yes, I'm not going to doubt that some parents may have a little favoritism over one child and the other. That's life. But I don't believe that their love is not just as genuine for one child as it is for the other. just imagine, I don't want to think of it, but something goes wrong. You will see the pain. Because as I said to us, children are a gift from God to you. And there is no guarantee how long you are going to be able to have that gift as part of your life. Why spend time holding anger? Spend time loving and enjoying and embracing the greatness of that gift. Especially if the son came and said, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against God. Just make me one of your hired servants. But he says, no, you are my son. You were lost and now you are found. Possessions in life are materialistic. They come and they go. Life is a gift from God to be treasured, nurtured. Our children are our future. They may fall, but they will all rise again. And when they rise, what you become as a parent is to put your hand around them and says, I am here with you. Be willing to forgive. We were not perfect. Yes, our kids will tell us when we say something to them, they'll say, well, that's Dad. What does he know? Well, don't worry. We all said the same thing to our parents. What do they know? And then we say to ourselves, geez, maybe I should have listened. But our same prayer that our parents prayed for us, we now have to pray for our children. We'll pray that they'll get it someday. We will pray that they will get it someday. And true, they will get it. It is called where the light finally comes on. But when it comes on, it will shine forever because God has still been there protecting them. You are a child. We are all children of God. It is easy for us to want to think like the scribes and the Pharisees. There's no life without suffering. But suffering brings hope. And hope brings joy. And joy is individual to each and every one of us. My joy and your joy will not be the same. But embrace it. Embrace it as the Father saw his son from afar off. Just imagine how he must have ran to his son. We all can sit here and tell a story about one of our children or about someone or a brother and sister who might have fallen. But the God we have picks us back. We have to remember that the God we serve is the same God that we find on the mountaintop and the same God that is in the valley. So whether we are on high or we are low, that God is still consistent with us. Forgiveness is a release of a burden. And because you give it to God, the burden becomes even lighter. My brothers and sisters, our journey will have ups and downs. And especially in this Lenten season, I am seeing more ups. I'm seeing more downs than ups. But you know what's great? In a couple of weeks, we're going to celebrate a resurrection. And we saw that Jesus had the resurrection of that celebration. We too must embrace that celebration, that resurrection. Martin Luther King tells it to us great. Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It's a constant attitude. Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It's a constant attitude. And I ask you, my brothers and sisters, today, to find that attitude, to forgive. Because our brothers and sisters were lost, and now they've been found. Our brothers and sisters were lost, and now they are found. Find a brother and sister today and just forgive them. And don't ask me who's your brother or your sister. It's the one who needs forgiveness. For we all are lost at some time, but we are found in the love of Jesus Christ. Amen. Please stand as we reaffirm our faith by together saying our Nicene Creed. We believe in one God,
the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all that is seen and unseen. We believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, eternally begotten of the Father, God from God,
light from light, true God from
true
true
God,
begotten not made, of one being with the Father. Through him all things were made. For us and for our salvation, he came down from heaven.
By the power of the Holy Spirit, he became incarnate from the Virgin Mary,
And was made man. For our sake he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered death and was buried.
On the third day he rose again. In accordance with the Scriptures, he ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father.
He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead,
And
and his kingdom will have no end.
We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life,
Who proceeds from the Father and the Son. With the Father and the Son he is worshipped and glorified. He has spoken through the prophets.